Hello everyone in podcast land, welcome back to another TreeCoin episode. Just before we get started, remember to hit the like button and subscribe just below. We've got lots of other episodes and we're across a whole bunch of different social media, so come and like us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, X, sorry. So welcome to this one. I'm joined by Demian, TreeCoin CEO, and Michael, who you would have recognised from the previous episode, one of the very important shareholders, and also a buyer in his own right, Ketzer Coleman, legal firm, so a TreeCoin buyer. So we thought, looking at the final little couple of comments that came in the previous episode, which were around the carbon market and the problems with the existing carbon market and these big barriers to entry, and then the much more small-scale growers and buyers and what the opportunity there, we thought that's worth us having a fireside chat around, like a whole episode just on that. What do you think?
Yeah. So it's great to hear Michael's industry perspective around serious companies that have a serious amount of land and have a serious intention to participate in carbon revenue, as they should do, but they're sort of exhausted by the barriers to entry, which the regulated schemes unfortunately impose. Having said that, we flip that around to an opportunity for our business to disrupt that, make it significantly easier for landowners to participate and benefit from, and also making it easier for the other participants, the buyers and people retiring tokens to offset, but basically easier for everybody in one end-to-end platform. So maybe Michael, say a bit more about your perspective on the industry side.
Well, I used to work at Telstra, and the idea of creating a digital marketplace to bring buyers and sellers together is a very familiar one. It's put Telstra's directories business out of business, for example, because Telstra was really bad at this back in the day and was supplanted by eBay and Seek and carsales.com. So it's a well-established, disruptive digital economy maneuver to set up a digital online marketplace, and the key is making it easy to use. There is no such marketplace at the moment for carbon credits and carbon offset, which is a globally understood industry solving global problems, and Australia's a pioneer in many respects in establishing markets, but they're incredibly highly regulated and hardly anyone can participate in them. No one's cracked the nut of democratising those markets, so the regulatory framework has not yet generated a market-based solution, and that's where I think the opportunity for an organisation like TreeCoin, which is a digital native organisation, that's the territory that you occupy, and TreeCoin's as well advanced as anyone that I've come across globally, having spent a bit of time trying to do something like this and working with clients who are trying to do similar things.
Yeah. So when you look at the sort of forecast of what becomes possible when more carbon revenue does flow to more players locally and globally, what are we seeing? And for yourself, Sylph, as well, from an economics perspective, like what will the world actually look like? Say we're wildly successful and others like us, really take up the charge and it becomes the mainstream. What do you think the landscape will look like?
Well, I think it'll be the TreeCoin platform borrows from two separate kinds of markets. One is digital currency, and the explosion of digital currency in the last decade has been extraordinary. I think it's a game changer for economics generally. The difference that I don't own any Bitcoin and I haven't been on Coinbase. I'm not a digital native, so this is all new to me. But evidently, it's been a wildly successful type of product that's emerged out of thin air. Some would say it still kind of consists of thin air. So for serious players who do want to do something about carbon reduction, the beauty of TreeCoin is that it's a asset-backed digital currency, so more akin to a gold-backed currency or a stock market futures-backed digital currency. So TreeCoin borrows from that kind of well-developed school of products on the digital market. and also from the old-fashioned kind of certificate. This is my world that I come from in the legal services sector. We deal in pieces of paper, certificates and contracts and documents and registrations, and being able to certify and validate that something has been done is incredibly important. There's a highly regulated Australian carbon market, which there's a lot of my colleagues in the legal sector and the compliance and regulatory worlds spend a lot of time and get paid a lot of money to work for banks and miners and oil companies and government on developing the regulated sector. TreeCoin is making that world available to average organisations who don't have that in-house team of compliance experts, or a KPMG or a pollination consulting firm on tap to do that work and get paid for doing that work. So I think TreeCoin is busting down the barriers to that regulated, registered, validatable carbon market.
Yeah. I mean, if KPMG and Deloitte would like to get in touch with us, we'd be very open to that conversation. We've talked a few times on the previous episodes about the benefits of TreeCoin democratizing access to the carbon market from the buyer's side. Like we've talked about, we had a little bit of a chit chat about one of your companies, Enha, and how Enha had gone from quite a laborious and expensive process with Climate Active, to get a lot of specific, to the point, combed through emissions data, and then that was important, but then continue on to actually go through make purchasing and offsetting. And then we compared that to the process with TreeCoin, and we were talking about the benefits and the gains for Enha, how sort of an extra 80% of the total cost of that could have ended up in the hands of the landowner, the farmer, rather than the analysts and the consultants. But I feel like we haven't really talked a lot about the opportunity for the growers. So from a buyer side, we're talking about small scale buyers who want to get involved in carbon offsetting for a utility purpose, but maybe they only need 5 or 6 tons of emissions. Like maybe they're just a small legal firm, 2 people with laptops and a car driving around. When you do your calculations of office emissions, electricity, the cars, you might be talking about 10 or 11 tons over that entire year, if that.
So the total cost to purchase that, offset it, retire it through TreeCoin is it's about 80% plus cheaper than going through a regulated scheme. And I know that from the Enha experience. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Going through Climate Active for Enha as a consultancy, we've got about 10 Australian staff. More than 80% of the annual cost of doing that goes to the third party audit and the government registration fees, and less than 20% actually goes to the purchase of the tokens from the actual forest, which is the whole point of it. So what should be in that, if that was all that was available, what should be done is for the sake of the climate impact, you could just double the amount of tokens you're buying, unregister from that scheme, cut your costs by half as a business, and double your climate impact all at the same time. And give a lot more revenue to the actual growers. So I do want people to hear that and listen like that. So I'll say again, you could, on Climate Active type participants in Australia and globally, you could double your impact by buying twice the number of tokens from TreeCoin or another platform. So you're well and truly exceeding your carbon emissions by any standard of margin of error or uncertainty or validatability. Plus, you'd be halving your spend. Or in the case of Enha, I can certify that. Other businesses, obviously, your actual savings would depend on your own specific conditions. So I won't certify for everybody, but that's the magnitude that we're dealing with. And so while that's kind of frustrating, it's ripe for disruption. And what we've heard with Enha clientele is that what they need is a certificate that's got traceability, auditability, some third-party validation at some point in the ecosystem, which is something that we're gaining in the near future, and then you're done. It doesn't for most end clients, if it's supply chain that might care about this stuff, it doesn't matter to them that many of them that it has to be the government regulated scheme only. That would be a valid offset. So I do appreciate that the government schemes have an intention to help to make it fair, level the playing field, and kind of improve the transparency. But I think the unfortunate outcome of that is this onerous aspect, which we talked about in the previous episode as well. So all of the above is a very inefficient system, which we're here to fix, basically.
Yeah. I've looked at the Australian standard, which is based on a global standard for carbon reduction metrics, and TreeCoin meets the Australian standard. So there is a regulated Australian government-backed statutory scheme which meets the standard, and then there's a number of measures and types of carbon credit that meet the standard. But you don't have to be a government regulated scheme to meet the global standard for carbon reduction. You do need to have adopt one of the recognised methodologies, which you'll know more about this than I do. Gold standard, Vera. There's another one that's in use.
Like a grower.
So those are global standards, and that they're not contingent on a particular Australian government regulated framework. They're designed to be global standards, and TreeCoin meets those. And most people aren't going to spend $600 downloading the Australian standard and read the bloody thing, because it's hard going, let me tell you. But they want to be assured. And their procurement people and their compliance people, so local councils and whoever, universities, will, when they're signing off on the annual report to the board or shareholders, there'll be a statement in there that we're offsetting our carbon footprint, and someone's going to want to be able to check that, and TreeCoin offers that validation 100% to in the same extent as someone who a mining company that is using the Australian regulated ACCU unit.
So, like, looking back to that, and then before we move on to talk about the grower opportunity, just to help people at home, because if you're new to this space, you might not know what are some of the standards in terms of like market pricing people are paying for these things, or you might have an overinflated idea. So at the moment, like current market price, the TreeCoin token shifts around in buy and demand, like it moves on a natural market, and current market price is around $15 Australian for one token, and one token is equal to 1 tonne of carbon dioxide drawdown. So if you're a small office that you tally your annual emissions and you've got 10 tonnes of total emissions, the cars, the electricity, the gas heater, the laptops, you only need to purchase 10 tokens. That's only 150 Australian dollars. That's a tiny transaction, but it's something important. You do still need like a proper certificate, and you still need all of the stamps on that so that you can file that away or give that to your supply chain. But the idea that you go, okay, for $150, I need to spend $3,000 worth of auditing and analysing to get to that point. That's the thing. We think that's a different part of the market. This part of the market is like you said, if you got 10 back as a figure from things like Zero Office Someday, a shout out to someday.io. If people use Zero, that integrates really well with the carbon accounting platform, and then they can upload data and sort of spit out a rough estimate. Even if you took the rough estimate and tripled it, and you said, I'll just buy $400 of tokens and retire them, you might still be at half the price. Yeah. But at the moment, that kind of micro transaction, that's just not supported, in terms of these very large scale buying platforms and processes and audit checks. But if we jump to the growers side, because the same is true on the growers, right? If you've got these micro transactions going on in the buyers, you also have these microtransactions in growers. Someone who just has 1 hectare or 4 hectares of land, like the Badalisha project's a really good example that Kester Coleman bought from Kenya. Yep. That's made up of revegetation projects across multiple sites on Rasinga Island, and they vary from like 1 hectare, 0.9 hectares up to about 4 hectares, I think. And there's tokens being generated from those different sites that all come together under the Badalisha revegetation project. So it might be that one of them produces, 30 tokens in that year. So that if it only produced, like in terms of the total, that's less than that. We're talking a couple $100 worth of tokens that produce from that site.
Yep.
If they had to go through this phenomenal rigmarole, spend $100,000 to get the audited, that's never going to happen. But if they can produce that through a one-stop shop like TreeCoin, very, very low barrier to entry, they can contribute 30 tokens to the global carbon drawdown effort, right? 30 tokens here, 20 tokens there, 10 tokens there. You add that up across the globe, that's huge.
And TreeCoin as a global digital currency lends itself to smart project managers and organisers and community groups that can aggregate those projects in the same way that your contact in the Badalisha project has done. So it might not be worth one individual coffee plantation owner from East Timor to go to the trouble of registering and getting familiar with the TreeCoin website. We hope that it will become more and more common over time. But an entrepreneurial project manager from East Timor could coordinate the whole ecosystem of local growers as a group, and they can set up the distribution system for that group of projects. So the barriers to entry will be managed by people who will become very familiar with the process and understand how the value of putting some time into getting familiar with the TreeCoin marketplace.
Yeah, exciting future.
Woo. I think we've got a sort of minute left in our allocated time for our chit-chat. 2 to 3 minutes left for our allocated time.
That's right.
I suppose I just wanted to, I thought we could roll this all around, like bring the string of the conversation back. We talked about these two different groups, ultimately what we're advocating for, and TreeCoin is one representation of this. There are other players out there who are onto the same thing, like the market is ripe for disruption. And what we're really talking about is the massive global potential of grassroots and micro transactions in the carbon space, so that rather than having it all relegated to don't even bother unless you've got 10,000 hectares of grower land and you've got a bankroll to fund the first couple of $100,000 audits, and then maybe, or don't even bother purchasing unless you're Telstra, and we're going to go through. You're going to pay 4 full-time staff just to do your calculations, but you haven't even spent $1 yet on the actual offsets. Take it out of that world and bring it back to the fish and chip shop down the road who want to put in their window that they are carbon offset fish and chip or neutral or negative, and they're like, oh, we can actually do that. You could actually, for very little cost, comparatively, if it turns out that they only need 50 tokens, 60 tokens, 60 tons for that year, I don't know what that would be, you'll work that out. They could do that now, quite quickly. And from projects like Badalisha, and I get really excited because we get updates from the growers all the time, and we get photos through the growers who are on the receiving side of this revenue stream, right? Like in the TreeCoin system, the growers receive 85% of the revenue of the total number of tokens that are produced, and the revenue goes straight to them. That's massive.
Yeah, and it probably helps with trust building. I'm just thinking like in this sector, the trust deficit is actually it's a big problem, and the greenwash and anti-greenwash sort of football that's getting knocked around so much around the press and around the world is distracting from getting on with making carbon drawdown part of our economy and growing a load more forests. So if there's more peer-to-peer trust at grassroots level being built up between growers and buyers, that could be a remedy for this sort of intractable problem of greenwash and anti-greenwash that's just kind of getting worse rather than better, while the climate challenge is getting more pressing. What do you reckon about that?
Well, one of my passions is finding finance for conservation efforts. And I've always thought about this as the back paddock problem, like a farmer who's not getting revenue,
monetize that,
that can grow a cash crop, which is carbon sequestration, trees or vegetation that draws down carbon from the atmosphere. If we can solve that, be a contributor to solving that, I think that's an enormous contribution.
All right, well, it's been good. Thanks everyone again. Subscribe, follow us on the socials. and look out for the next exciting podcast. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Demian. That was great. Thanks very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Good to be
Yeah,
here.
thanks everyone at home.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.
See you.